All right, so you know how it is. Sometimes you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of a complex event, but without getting lost in, a million details.
Right, like the core of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's what we're doing today with a deep dive into these shootings back in 2008 in Skagit County, Washington.
And we've got a whole set of news articles which really break down the whole timeline and all the people involved and the repercussions. It's a pretty tragic series of events.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And so our mission today is to basically extract the essential facts and get a really clear picture of what happened and in what order and who was at the center of it all and what the broader implications of it all are, without drowning in too much detail.
Right.
So let's start at the very beginning. This whole thing began on September 2nd, 2008 in Skagit County, Washington. But it wasn't just limited to one location. It kind of spanned from this town of Alger out onto Interstate 5 and eventually into Mount Vernon.
Yeah, and the very first incident that kind of set things off seems to have been a call to the police at around 2:15 p.m. from a woman named Denise Zamora. She reported that her son, 28-year-old Isaac Zamora, was trespassing at a neighbor's place in Alger and had taken a rifle and a shotgun.
And it was that call that tragically led to the first responder on the scene, Deputy Ann Jackson, getting to Zamora's house in Alger and being shot and killed.
Yeah, that's right. And when other deputies got to the scene, they found another person already dead, too.
Wow.
And from there, the situation in Alger just spiraled. Things escalated really fast.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
The articles say that Zamora went on to kill 3 more people just in that immediate area and wound 2 others before taking off.
Jeez. So what happened next?
Well, what followed was a high-speed chase. Zamora got onto Interstate 5, heading south, driving something like 90 miles an hour, and he was being chased by troopers, sheriff's deputies, police officers from Mount Vernon. Like, everyone was after him.
Oh, it's like something out of a movie.
Yeah, it was a crazy situation, and during this whole chase, Trooper Troy Giddings got shot.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but here's the incredible thing. He actually managed to drive himself to a hospital despite being wounded.
What?
Yeah, he was later discharged, so he was okay in the end, but it just shows you how intense things were.
Yeah, for sure. So did the violence continue along I-5?
Sadly, yes, a motorcyclist who was at a Shell gas station got injured by gunfire, and then there was the death of Leroy Lange, who was driving south in his SUV when he was shot and killed.
So sad. It's just such a terrifying and unpredictable situation, unfolding on a major highway.
Right, you can just imagine the chaos and fear.
Totally. So this rampage eventually ended, though, right? When did that happen?
Yeah, it finally came to an end when Zamora got to the Skagit County Sheriff's Office in Mount Vernon.
Okay.
This was around 4:30 p.m., so only a couple of hours after that initial call to the police.
So everything happened really fast.
Yeah, and he surrendered there and was taken into custody.
Okay, so that gives us the chronological order of everything that happened.
Right, the basic timeline.
But to really get a grip on why this happened, we got to dig into the background of this guy, Isaac Zamora.
Yeah.
The sources say he had some mental health challenges and also had a criminal record. What can you tell me about those challenges and how they might connect to this whole thing?
Well, his mom, Denise Zamora, actually gave some really important context about his struggles. She said that his mental health issues started after their family home burned down about 10 years before the shootings.
Wow.
And it's not uncommon for something traumatic like that, a house fire, to be a turning point, especially if someone's already vulnerable.
Yeah, and it really makes you think about the importance of long-term mental health support after something like that.
For sure. And sadly, sometimes when that support isn't there, the consequences can be really devastating.
Yeah. So what else do we know about Zamora's life?
Well, it seems he spent some time living in the woods, and he worked as a house painter for a while.
Okay.
But things took a turn for the worse in the time leading up to the shootings.
In what way?
It seems he got really despondent after breaking up with his girlfriend, and then he got injured while he was painting. And that injury actually led to another big problem, an addiction to painkillers.
Oh, wow. So it's like a whole bunch of things piling up at once.
Exactly. You've got the mental health challenges, the stress of the breakup, the pain from the injury, and then the addiction. It's like a perfect storm of personal crisis.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And what was he doing right before the shootings?
Well, he had moved into a trailer on his family's property in Alger.
Okay.
But here's the heartbreaking part. His mother, Denise, apparently tried to get him help multiple times.
Oh, wow.
And even Deputy Ann Jackson, the one who ended up being killed, had offered to help before she told Denise to reach out anytime she needed it.
It's just so sad. It really shows that people around him could see he needed help.
Right. It really highlights how complex these situations can be.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to learn that Zamora had actually been in jail recently, too.
Oh, you're right. He served 6 months in 2008, just before all this happened.
And the thing that really stands out to me is that the corrections officers were trying to get him mental health treatment.
Yeah, that's a really important detail. It shows that even within the system, there was some awareness of his mental health needs.
But it also seems like there was a huge gap in information or communication somewhere.
How so?
Well, his corrections officer didn't know that Zamora had guns in his trailer,
Oh,
and
wow.
that would have been a violation of his conditions.
You would think that would have been something they knew.
Right. It seems like if they had known, they might have been able to intervene more.
Yeah, it raises some serious questions about how these different systems like corrections and mental health services actually share information.
Totally. It's like a breakdown in communication with potentially really tragic consequences.
Absolutely. So, after all of this happened, there was a lot of scrutiny, which is understandable given the scale of the tragedy.
Makes sense.
The governor of Washington, Christine Gregoire, actually called for an independent review of how Zamora's criminal cases had been dealt with.
That makes sense. I mean, there was obviously a need to understand if the system had failed in some way. Yeah.
Right, and to see if there were any missed opportunities to intervene.
So what happened in the legal proceedings that followed?
Well, in his trial in 2009, Zamora pleaded guilty to 4 counts of aggravated murder.
Okay.
But interestingly, he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity to 2 other counts.
And what does that mean exactly?
Well, generally it means you're saying that because of a mental disease or defect, you didn't understand what you were doing or that it was
So
wrong.
you weren't in your right mind, basically.
Yeah, that's the gist of it.
Okay, so what was the outcome of the trial?
He got 4 life sentences for those aggravated murder charges, and he was sent to Western State Hospital for mental health treatment.
So even though he was found guilty, he was still going to receive treatment.
Yes, that's right. But his legal journey didn't end there.
Really? What else happened?
Well, in 2012, he was transferred from the hospital to the Monroe Correctional Complex because there were concerns about the safety of the staff and other patients.
Wow.
And as of 2019, the sources say he was trying to appeal for a new trial.
So it's a case that's had a lot of legal twists and turns.
Yeah, and it shows the long-lasting impact of this whole thing.
Definitely. And it's not just the criminal courts that were involved, right?
You're right, there were civil consequences too.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
In 2013, the state of Washington agreed to pay $9 million to settle lawsuits from the families of the victims.
Wow. 9 million.
Yeah, the families argued that more could have been done to prevent the shootings.
So they felt like the system failed to protect their loved ones.
That's right, and the settlement really highlights the lasting impact of these events on everyone involved, and it raises those really tough questions about responsibility and what could have been done differently.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that these aren't just abstract events. They have real human consequences.
Absolutely, and we can't forget the individuals whose lives were lost.
Yeah, for sure.
The sources name the 6 people who were killed: Chester Rose, who was 58, Deputy Ann Jackson, who was 40, Julie Binchus, who was 48, David Radcliffe, who was 57, Greg Gillum, who was 38, and Leroy Lange, who was 64.
It's important to remember their names.
And we should also remember those who were injured and survived.
Like,
Richard Trustin, who was stabbed, Fred Binchus and Ben Mercado, who were wounded by gunfire, and Trooper Troy Giddings, who thankfully recovered from his gunshot wound.
yeah, it's just a whole web of people whose lives were forever changed by this one event.
It really is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that what we've looked at is a really horrific series of events that came from a very complex situation.
Yeah, for sure.
There were obviously serious and long-standing mental health challenges for Zamora, and it seems like substance abuse played a role too.
Right, and then on top of that, it looks like there were some breakdowns in the support systems that were supposed to help him.
Yeah, it's like there were people trying to help, but the system as a whole wasn't able to prevent this from happening.
His mom's efforts to get him help, Deputy Jackson's offer of assistance, the corrections officers trying to get him treatment, it all points to a system that knew there was a problem but ultimately couldn't stop this tragedy.
It's so frustrating to think about.
It is, and it makes you wonder about how effective our mental health support systems really are.
Yeah, and hearing those names again, Chester Rose, Ann Jackson, Julie Binchus, David Radcliffe, Greg Gillum, and Leroy Lange, it just really brings home the human cost to this whole thing.
It does, and it leaves us with some really big questions to think about.
Like what?
Well, how do we provide truly effective mental health support and make sure people in crisis can get help when they need it?
And are the systems we have in place really equipped to identify and stop these kinds of tragedies before they happen.
Exactly. And then there's that really tough question of where individual responsibility ends and where systemic failures begin.
It's heavy stuff for sure.
It really is, and it's something we all need to keep thinking about
Absolutely.
because it's a conversation that could potentially save lives.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody, and keep those questions in mind.